Hi, we're here on Fantasy Fiction Focus once again. Christian A. Brown is our guest today. Hi, Christian.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Not too bad. Now, you are the author of A Feast of Fates in the fantasy genre, I guess you'd say the novel is, part of a larger series which is in production, as it were. So, what can you tell us about this wonderful book of yours?
Uh, it is, well, first, I'm very pleased by how successful it's been and how well it's been received by readers. So I just, this is an opportunity to talk to those people. So thank you for supporting me and for believing in my work, because that's the best thing that an artist can hope for. Aside from that, it's a very human story. I mean, I think that as a society, we're very focused on the extremes, the black and the white. And I think in Feast of Fates, like there's a very large and varied cast of characters. There's a lot of gray. There's a lot of the in-between personalities, and that's where I find we find the most interesting human drama is in people who aren't, these extremes. These people who are just very real and very believable. So even though it's a fantasy story, it has that sort of Game of Thrones ism where these characters could all be real people, and that's what I set out to create, and that's I'm happy that I feel that I have.
Now, yeah, you mentioned Game of Thrones. It's in the news again at the moment as the new season's coming out and everything. But your story doesn't include some of those elements like dragons and things like that. And you mentioned earlier about magic and technology combining in the story.
Yes, Techno Magic. So, I mean, I wanted to create a society that sort of mirrors our own. So, in order to do that, I needed to have something relative to science and to modern advancements in medicine. And so I came up with Techno Magic, which is Technomagik. So magic with a K. That's how I do it in my book. There's not too many of those plays on words because it would get annoying, but that's one of the ones I use just to sort of make it unique. So anyway, so yes, it's essentially technology like robotic pieces or engines that are fueled by a person's will, by a sorcerer's will. So yes, that's one of the elements that's different. There's no dragons. I sort of play with the mythos a little bit. Like, and rather than dragons, I have these giant sort of elemental forces called worms, WYRMS. Sort of like an old Englishism, I guess, bastardized pigeon English, if you want to say it. So yeah, I've really tried to make a unique world that while it has these very fantastical elements, you can still see the functions of a society and the functions of law and order and economics and all those things that make for a believable world.
Yeah, so I suppose that you've got to really invent a believable world these days. We mentioned Game of Thrones, obviously, because it seems that it's sort of everyone sort of seems to have heard of it, but there's a lot of competition in this genre. So how do you make your book stand out?
Well, I think you fundamentally starts with just really wanting to know what you want to write. Like, it took me a number of years, and it took me a very dark experience with my mother and just growing up before I sort of figured out what I wanted to write. I could not have written this story 10 years ago. I mean, I tried. I've been trying to write this story since I was a teenager, or since I played Dungeons and Dragons way back in the day. Like, I've always had that sort of attraction to fantasy, but I could never really make anything of it. So yeah. Having said that, I lost track of the question.
No, I was just saying about the competition. We've got to set yourself apart from all the rest of the stuff out there in the bookstores and everywhere else.
I think it's just really just trying to figure out what your voice is. So it took me a long time to figure that out, bringing it back to the point I was trying to make. And yeah, once I figured out my voice and based on my own life experience, and it was just turned out to be a unique story. So I was very blessed that way that the experiences I have had, were unique, and we all are unique though. Like, that's everyone has their own unique tapestry that makes them up. So it's not like I'm so special because of all my marginalization experiences or anything like that. Those are just things that defined me. But anyone, anywhere, has a very interesting story. So I think it's just, as a writer, finding that voice and that groove that you're very comfortable with writing, and that honesty. And I think as long as you write something that is honest and has feeling and passion, then I think that is conveyed to your readers. That's what I believe. I think, yeah.
So how much of the experiences that you had in life and family, how much of that is part of the book? Any
Everything. Yeah. Everything. Like, I mean, even if you look at the sort of overarching, as I said, like I sort of talked about, how no one's really black and white, and that's true. But there is a very one-note sort of, evil present in the book, which is this thing called the Black Queen, and she's just this like, entropic, remorseless entity, very alien, very like I do sort of approach sci-fi in certain areas because she's very sort of Cthulhu style old one, very remote and nothing human about her at all. So that entity actually is essentially, cancer to me. Like when I was coming up with the concept for this creature, it was just in going through my mother's illness with her. She'd had lymphoblastic leukemic lymphoma, which is nasty. But anyway, so in going through that with her and learning a lot about cancer, that's how I sort of formed this villain, which is, even though she's a natural force, she's dark, she's wicked, or we see her as wicked, but really she's just serving her purpose in the natural order. So yeah, so I mean, even things like that. And a lot of the instances of kindness and humanity that I experienced, and love that I've written them into the book as well too.
So is there a mother character in the story, or something based on a motherly figure?
There's a lot of women in different roles. So there's one of the well, if you want to look at mothering roles, there's this one woman. So she works for sort of she doesn't work. She serves the sort of darker empire. There's two empires. There's like a Western, very libertine philosophical nation that's ruled by these two very kind and ancient kings. And then there's the eastern side of this world, which is very jealous of the western side. So you have sort of a political play, which is in some ways parallel to some of the situations we see here on Earth. And in that empire, so in the sort of bad empire, there's this woman called Alessandra, and she works very high up within that society. And she's a really interesting character, and she's one of those very gray characters where, even though she does a lot of ruthless actions in the context of her society, because that's how they act, like they're all ruthless people, so you're either ruthless or you're dead. So she has, that's how she must act. So even though she does some pretty reprehensible things, she still above all acts in interest for her children. So you see through the story that she's just doing this to protect her family, and because she loves her family, and she will do anything to protect them. So she's a really interesting mothering kind of figure. She's one of the ones that comes to mind.
Okay, that was something I once wanted to ask you with regards to the mother element, but also about the female character. You have strong female characters in this story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess. I don't really. I don't. I wrote this piece a while ago. It was a blog. It was on women in fantasy. It's just personal piece, just stuff I don't like to see in fantasy for women, for female characters. And it was like stuff, just basic stuff like, being too powerless, always having to be saved. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. Oh, stupidity. Like and that applies to, a lot of these things can apply to a male character as well, but like, because no one wants to see a stupid character. That's frustrating to me as a reader, watching a character who will go through an experience, stumble, and not learn anything from it. Like if you're going to stumble, if you're going to be a hero, you need to pick yourself up and learn from that experience and move on. So yeah, when I set out to write Feast of Fates, I mean, I wrote a lot of these women just sort of based on, I had some really cool role models, like female role models in my life. And a lot of it just comes from the women I've known and the women I've seen in my life, and who've been very accomplished. And yeah, so then when I guess the editorial reviews and stuff came out, they were like, "Oh, strong female characters." I'm like, well, I was just sort of writing what feels natural to me, in that setting for heroic women.
Oh, I see. So it wasn't a deliberate policy to do this then, because I know that we hear this all the time about not so much any genre actually. I think we hear this quite often. That like superhero movies is quite a common one for that, where it's like in terms of the female characters, there's all lots of complaints about it. So this was just natural then for you to do this.
Yes. And I don't think that like creating a strong female character doesn't mean that you just have her do all the things that a man would do, because that's just sort of playing with the traditional roles in a different way, and you're not really changing them. So I think it's someone who challenges the status quo. It's someone who goes against the grain, someone who doesn't give up. And I think that those are just attributes that you would want to write for any sort of heroic fantasy hero, regardless of whether they're male or female. But you see it less with women than you do with male characters.
So a refreshing change in some ways, then, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, this is the first book which came. When did it come out, by the way?
September. Sorry, the Kindle and digital version was out September, I think, 13th, and then the August the 1st was the paperback.
Okay, so now the next one is already done, I think you said, but not quite finished.
It's in its third draft, and then it has to go to the beta readers, and then I usually do 2 sets of proofing afterwards just to make sure it's nice and clean. So I'm anticipating that by like end of April.
And this is the book, and there's how many books will there be?
So it's 4 Feasts Till Darkness, so there's going to be 4 in this. Yeah. Originally, so when I started, the first draft of something resembling a story that I ever had was I finished that back in 2010, and it was one of those things that I've been working on for like forever. It's like, that friend that you have that's, oh, he's writing a manuscript, oh, he's writing a story. Like, it's like that was my thing, and I was writing this bloody thing for like 20 years basically. And then I finally sat down and finished it. And I finished a draft of a story which in no way resembles Feast of Fates, but it was a draft. And I redrafted it, and then I met with an editor, and we went over some ideas, and we found out that I've been writing the wrong period in my history. So she always wanted me to go back further and to explore more. Her name is, by the way, Barbara Burson. She's worked for Penguin. She's a freelance editor now. She's absolutely brilliant, and she'll eviscerate your work, but she'll do it in a really nice way, like that doesn't offend you, But she'll point out all the things that need to be fixed or looked at or examined. So we realized that I was writing the wrong era of my world's history, and so we went back and back and back, and then finally came to the very, very start of the story, which is where you should begin anyways. So that's where we are.
Okay, and so the next one will be out soon, then, I guess. And so when are you anticipating the entire thing will be out there in the world for people to buy?
Well, this arc will be finished, I'm hoping, by this time next year. So you'll have all 4 books out with distribution through all the channels, and then I have another project I'm toying with working on in between them. So I might just see if I can whip out. I mean, you never whip out a quick manuscript, but I'll work on something else, I think, just to give myself a break. And then I'm going to get back into the second arc of the story, which is going to be 2 books. And then I'll probably write another book in between, and then I'll finish off the very end of the story, which is 1 book. So it's a total of 7 books broken up into 3 different periods.
So there won't be 7 Feasts of Fates. There will be seven Feasts Till Darkness. There'll still only be 4.
Only just the 4, and then the darkness has to happen, obviously, till it's Till Darkness, and then the second arc. The first manuscript I ever wrote, the one that was all chopped up and had to keep going back and going back. That was actually the 5th book. So now I have to go back and rewrite that book with the foundation of the other 4 books already laid.
Now that sounds very confusing, of course, to some people, not to me, because I've gone through all this myself in the past. But so it obviously takes a long time, and this is, I suppose, really for anybody who's watching this who is an aspiring writer, I suppose. It's always good to sort of point out, you mentioned whipping out a manuscript. It doesn't really happen like that, does it?
It's a lot of I find it's work. You just have to dedicate the time to do it, and whatever time you do have, you have to make sure excuse me, that you are writing. So thank you, sorry about that. So like, for example, like I have a set schedule where I'm regimented with my routine, and I'll do my 5 hours of writing a day, and I'll crank out I usually have about 10-page minimum, and anything over that is gravy. But that's just what I force myself to do. And then if you get that, works for me. That's not going to work for everybody. I'm lucky in the sense that I don't have young children. I mean, my most demanding, cohabitants are my little cat. I don't know if you could see her back there.
Yes, your assistant in the writing process. No.
Yes, my PA. So that's Percy. She's cute. So I mean, I just have 2 cats and a partner that I sort of have to look after, but that's about it. But knowing that, I make the most of my time. So I think it's, whether you have children or whether you have a freer schedule, just make the most of that time and sit down and do it. I read, I think it was Stephen King's On Writing a number of years ago. This is back before I started writing. And it was a decent book, but I mean, the underlying message was just do it. Like, just find the time and do it. And eventually you will have that story. It's not going to be perfect, but at least that's what a first draft is. First draft is never perfect. It's just done, and then you move from there.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think that somebody had mentioned once, and it seemed a bit of a strange expression, that writers write. And I thought, well, of course they do. It's like, well, no, but I meet a lot of people who want to write books, but they're not actually doing any writing. They've got an idea, but they haven't started it yet. And unfortunately, it is work, right?
Yeah, no, it is. It's definitely work, yeah.
And the editing process, you thoroughly enjoy that, I'm sure, all the editing and proofreading. Isn't that great?
Yeah, I find actually I like reading the preprint galley. I like that. That's a nice experience because you have most of a book there and you're just sort of catching small stuff. And I actually enjoy quite a bit the first few really, structural gut edits where everything gets torn apart, because that illuminates the flaws in your story and it lets you know what you have to work on, and it's very helpful. It's the smaller edits, like the line editing, that drives me mental, because that, to me, it takes a long time because you want to make sure that the book is obviously clean, but it's just that process can take months and you feel like you're not accomplishing anything, right?
So how many versions of the story do you think there are? I'm assuming that obviously the very first version and the final version are very different, but obviously if there are 20 versions, version 16 and version 20 are going to be very similar. But how many versions are there of the first book?
So A Feast of Fates, excluding the draft that didn't really become a story yet, had 7 drafts. And I think saved on my computer, I think I have, just with like last minute changes and galley changes and stuff, and I think I have 52 versions of it. Yeah.
Good Lord, 50.
I'm like anal retentive for detail and everything. But the second one is a lot better. The second one, I think I only have 5 or 6 copies of so far, and I don't see that growing exponentially or out of control.
Well, I found that with my first one. I mean, I do a few visits to schools and teaching at the university, and I always take the first manuscript with me of the first book. And I think it was 28 versions. But the second one was dramatically shorter. The second one was maybe 6 or 7, like you say. So now I wanted to ask you something just quickly that I remembered. Is obviously a lot of characters and things are in fantasy novels and things, but you've also got this wonderful artwork on your website. Now, where does that fit in with the books? Obviously, that's not on the cover of the books.
No, it's just sort of supplementary. Like I wanted to create a really distinct visual experience for my readers, because and I think the artists that I found. So there's 2 artists. There's actually a few artists that I've worked with. Brian Garabrandt is one, and he does this very like ethereal, sort of unfinished, but still very real. Like you can still tell what it is. It's not like interpretive art at all. But yeah, he does these really beautiful, flowing ethereal pieces, and so that really complemented the sort of fairy tale, dreamlike aspects of some parts of Feast of Fates. And it doesn't give too much visually away to the reader, because I mean, readers like to sort of figure out what people look like on their own. I've learned they don't like too much they don't like to be told that this is what something is. So he was a really good pick for that, and we're working on with him. I'm actually doing this really cool project in the book. There's a game. It's sort of like tarot meets Crazy Eights. So people play a game with it. It's called Kings and Fates. And so he's actually making the cards right now. So I'm going to start rolling them out through the summer, through the spring and summer, just in anticipation for the launch. But yeah, he's doing these really beautiful tarot cards that we're working on right now. So he's
very nice. Actually leads us into a very interesting area there with the marketing and things, because that's obviously a good marketing ploy. I am assuming, probably shouldn't assume, I'm assuming that you're everywhere online. Your Twitter, your Facebook, you have a website that I've visited, and all the rest of it. You have stuff on YouTube. What are you doing to get this book into people's minds and having it stay there?
You just have to, I think the most important thing that you'll hear, which is totally true, is to stay active with whatever your voice and your message is. Like you have to keep talking about yourself first off, because there's a lot of noise. Not necessarily about yourself, but you should be talking just as yourself. So like I talk about women's issues, I talk about racial issues. I'll post tweets and stuff about issues related to those topics. So I don't think it's necessarily staying relevant as much as it is just staying active is very important. You like every Sunday, some Sundays I have a hangover because I may have gone out once in the blue moon, but I will still write my Sunday blog, and I will do it authentically. I will do it with that horrible hangover. It may not be the nicest Sunday blog, but I'll get it done. So my readers know that they can expect a Sunday blog every Sunday. So it's just little things like that, and obviously like smart marketing dollars, like figure out what your marketing spend is, and you need to have an actual tactics. Like you need to understand what your marketing strategy is. So you can make the best book in the world, and you'll hear this a lot, and it's actually true. Make the best book in the world. If nobody reads it, it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter unless you don't want anyone to read it. But assuming you want your work to be shared and you want to share in the human experience, then yes, it is necessary to use your voice and to stay active in online and in person as well too.
Now, not everybody, of course, is up to that sort of task, I guess. A lot of people who write are not marketers at all, and they shy away from the whole thing. They're actually scared of the whole experience. But I've been okay with it myself. I don't mind it, but it's not really for a lot of people. They're very mousy and want to stay at home and everything. But you have a publicist, I believe.
I do, yes. She's been great. So that was one of the smartest things I did, is in terms of generating attention and buzz. Yeah, she's great. Rachel Senthes at.
Yes, I thought it might be good to mention her name. Yes, on camera.
Yeah. Rachel Senthes, Gal Friday Publicity. She's great. She's very friendly, and she's like, not that I need hand holding, but she explains. She doesn't just do things in the dark. Like she keeps me in the loop with everything, which is great. So.
Yeah, I think there's certainly something that because I talked to Rachel on here actually. I had an interview with her a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the main thing that people don't understand is the different marketing and publicity. They're the same thing, aren't they? It's like, well, no, they're not. They're not the same thing at all. And so she was very good at pointing that out, because I think a lot of people can do their own marketing, but it's certainly you're just not able to do. Media contacts is one thing that publicists have that you and I, unless we're from the media in a previous profession, you're not going to have that many media contacts that are going to be much use to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, marketing essentially is just paying for ads. That's how you have to think of it. That's what you're doing. You're paying for ad space. Just because you have an ad doesn't mean anyone's going to see it. Doesn't mean anyone's going to necessarily talk about it. It means that you paid for that spot in that time. Whereas a publicist will get you, as you said, into all of those. They will get you those connections that you would not normally be able to achieve on your own. So yeah, she's been fantastic in that regard, just for like radio and promotional buzz. Yeah.
Yeah, like you say, if people don't, the greatest book in the world, if no one knows it actually exists, then it's not going to do you much good. Now, you mentioned that that you'll talk about this thing or that thing. So, do you make public appearances or do teaching or anything like that?
I do not. Well, funny you mentioned sort of being a hermit. Like depending on where I am, like right now I'm in manuscript mode, so this interview is perfect for me because I leave the house on the weekends. I'm basically home from Monday to Friday, just writing. But but I do get out there. I mean, like I did a radio appearance. I guess it was a couple weeks ago now. I've got some other stuff scheduled for the end of the month. So I do get out of the house when necessary, but I don't tend to do seminars or writing courses or any of that. I don't disdain them. I think they're very helpful. I think they're very helpful for a lot of people. I just honestly don't have the time right now for one. But I plan on going to Toronto has a book fair, and they have an international book fair here, and possibly one of the other book fairs down in the States I might go to in the summer as well too.
Well, I think that's it. Like you say, there are an awful lot of things out there. You could look at a whole list of festivals and places to go to promote your work, but you still have to find the time. It's a little bit like having lots of ideas for books, as I often think to myself, oh, yes, I should write this, that, the other. And when do I find that? Okay, well, that's going to take me a year to write, so how long am I going to live, I suppose, is what you have to think. Yeah, so it's a case of finding the finding the time. So, is there anything else you'd like to add to this wonderful exposure opportunity?
Anything else I'd like to add? Well, I mean, Feast of Fates is quite unlike anything you have read, so I guarantee that. That is the Christian Brown stamp of approval on uniqueness. It is a very complex and very different book, and I didn't set out to write something different. It just turned out that way, and it has, you have hints of love and death and honor and nobility. You have cancer. You have all these relevant social experiences that have been woven into the fantasy, into the tapestry of the story. And a lot of myth too, because I was also influenced by a lot of up here in Canada. So where are you? Oh, you're in Alberta. So I mean, we have like I'm actually part Cree. So I have like a little bit of I'm like 1/8 native. I have a bit of a connection, a very tenuous connection to that. But so there's elements of mysticism and it's a real hodgepodge. It's a real experience of a book, and I'm very proud of it. Like, you always walk away from something, and there's always that initial, oh my God, what have I done? It's out there in the world. What if people hate it? And everyone goes through that. And I think that's also important to mention to any aspiring authors. You're always gonna battle doubt, and I'm sure even the most like Stephen King, J.K. Rowling's, I'm sure they battle doubt just like everyone else, because you're only as good as your last thing. So these are all natural things. But yeah, so I've been very encouraged and pleased by the response, and I'm glad that people have taken to the story the way they have. And yes, I welcome you to Gdain. It's a wonderful world.
Well, the thing is, I think you mentioned earlier that it's done quite well. I mean, we joked about earlier, I think about 1 million copies in a week or something, but I mean, it's sold quite well to say that it hasn't been out for long, right?
Yeah, over 5,000 copies, which is great, of physical and digital. And I haven't even done, like, this is a great resource for anyone that hasn't tried it yet, but BookBub, like there's the BookBub promotions, they're very selective, but if you can actually get them to pick up your digital book, it's usually for a discount, then you can have massive distribution and sales, in hours. They usually do like a 1 or 2 day plug of your book. So, I haven't even done any of the big digital channels or big digital distribution, and it's not even in retail shops for another month or two. So that's not
this is also, I suppose, the fantasy genre that you're writing in is also a popular one.
Yeah.
And still buying books for that genre, like romance fans and fantasy fans and sort of murder mysteries and things like that. Those sort of people, those books are still selling quite nicely, despite what people tell us about the demise of reading.
Well, it's still happening. I mean, a lot of it's happening on people's tablets these days. That's where the Kindles and the Kobos, like, people read a ton of books, especially when you get them at a volume discount. So you're getting these books for like 99 cents sometimes. Yeah, it's an interesting era that we're in. I'll just say that. Like, I mean, in terms of promotion and exposure and access to the consumer, it's very direct. So take advantage of it. Yeah.
Well, we wish you all the best with that. It certainly seems like things are going well, and it sounds like if people have already bought the book, they're looking forward to the next one. And of course, we hope the first one's going to keep selling as well. So, thank you, Chris, for being with us today. It's been a wonderful experience, and good luck with the book and with the entire series.
Thank you so much, Simon. And thank you to your viewers. Have a good day.